Welcome. In this video, you will probably be seeing a lot of tools kept in front of you. In the earlier video, we learnt about each of these tools and got a little bit of understanding about what each of these tools are. In this video, we will try and understand how we can use these tools. Now, very specifically, how do we hold them? What are some of the essential aspects that we need to keep in mind while we are using these tools? So, first of all, let's look at this whole set of tools. Now, this is called an aligner set, and we learnt about aligner in the previous video. An aligner is like a screwdriver, which is essentially used to open the screws used in the mobile phones. Now, there are different types of aligners with very different heads, and we will understand what each of those heads are and what types of screws can be opened with what particular type of aligner. Apart from the aligner set, we also will learn about tweezers. Now, tweezers are used to hold micro components or small ICs. So, this is a very simple tool that is used to hold very small components, and it's easy. You can't hold it by fingers, and that's where you use these tweezers. They have different types of tweezers. This is another type of tweezer which can be used to reach difficult to reach positions when we are working on PCBs, when we are placing components on our mobile phones. Moving on, we also have something called as a cutter. Now, this is a larger version of a cutter. Typically for mobile repairing, we have a very small similar looking tool which usually is very small, and that is a cutter that we normally use while we are repairing mobile phones. Apart from these tools, we will also be using thinner and brushes while doing mobile repairing. Now, there are again different types of brushes that you can use. There are thin ones and there are thick ones. Whichever brush you intend to use during mobile repairing, please ensure that the bristles are really soft so that it doesn't impact the PCB or the mobile phone very badly. So, it has to be soft brush that can be used depending on where we need to use it. So, primarily the brushes are used to clean dust, or when we need to remove moisture, or we need to ensure that we need to clear off some dust, we use the brush along with the thinner. So, this thinner comes in larger bottles, but you can put them in smaller bottles and use them while you are doing your mobile repairing work. So, to remove moisture or dust, you normally place the thinner on the PCB, and then you can use the brush to clean it, and then use the hot air gun to actually dry out that particular area, thereby removing the dust and moisture. Now, let's move ahead and understand which aligner needs to be used with what particular type of screws. Now, first of all, let's take the black one, and if you can look at it closely, it is flat in its shape. You can see it very clearly. This is a flat head aligner. Basically, this is used where the screw head is really flat, and as you can see it, it's very clear. You can use it to open screws which have a flat type head. Now, as you can see on the screen, this is a small flat type head. Now, we are using a larger screw here just to ensure that you are able to see it clearly on the camera. However, on a mobile phone, this flat screw would probably be very, very small. But this is the shape in which a flat screw head is, and you need to use the flat aligner, flat head aligner, to actually open the screw or place the screw back. Now, you must ensure that whenever the screw needs to be opened, you use the right kind of aligner, no matter what the situation is, because if you use a different kind of aligner, the screw head could be affected, and it can create problems there. Now, when you hold the aligner, ensure that it fits in properly onto the screw head so that it is able to easily take it out. Now, we will see a few more screwdrivers or aligners, as we call it, with very different heads. So, let us try and understand what these other heads are. So, this is the second type of aligner that you would normally find. This is typically called a Phillips screwdriver. A Phillips screwdriver is very common. This basically has, it's also called a four-way aligner because it has four different bumps that actually fit into the screw head, and you can use this to open Phillips screws. And this comes in different thicknesses. So the same four heads can be a little more thicker depending on the screw head. So again, you need to be very careful about which Phillips screwdriver you use for which type of screw head. And as you can see, this is a Phillips screwdriver head, and you would be able to exactly fit in this. And as you said, there are four sides to it, and a Phillips aligner will actually fit in really well across these four, and you can hold it very tightly and you will be able to open or tighten a Phillips screw head using the Phillips aligner, the four-way aligner. Now, apart from these, there are also a few other aligners. These are six-way aligners. So just like the Phillips screw head has four heads in it, the six-way aligners usually have typically 6 heads or 6 directions in it. So the aligners fit in exactly into all those 6 heads, and you will be able to open it very easily or tighten it very easily with the 6-way aligners. And you can very clearly see that there are different sides to it, and it has a nice grip to it. So on these kind of screw heads, we will use the 6-way aligners. Again, these 6-way aligners come in very different thicknesses. So you need to be very careful on identifying the right aligner before you place it on the screw head. Incorrect aligners can, as I said earlier, can spoil the screw head and can result in damaging the mobile phone itself. Now let's go ahead and try and understand how we use this on an actual mobile phone and how we need to remove these screws on a mobile phone. Now mobile phones come in very different shapes and sizes. So you will need to find out which way you can open it. Some of them you need to push the lock using your fingers or your nails and you can open it. Some of them you can slide down. Some of them needs to be pressed hard to be opened. So identifying the right kind of opening, you will be able to open the cover, the back cover of a mobile phone. Now inside the mobile phone, you will need to identify the right kind of aligner to open the screws. You will probably be seeing 4 different screws on the sides of the mobile phone. You need to ensure that you pick up the right aligner and use it to open these screws. Now if you look at these screws closely, you will be able to identify the type of screw that's placed in it. Now for example, here you can see a Phillips screw head there. So there is a 4-way screw placed inside. So you need to ensure that you pick up the right Phillips screwdriver or the aligner for it. Now remember, these are very gentle. The process for opening these screws need to be very gentle. So you don't press them too hard because it could actually damage the PCB or the mobile phone itself. So you need to be gentle while you are actually placing your aligners on them and when you are opening those screws. But first and foremost, you need to ensure that you pick up the right type of aligner. Here we are going to try using a 4-way aligner here or a Phillips aligner. Now if you don't identify it right and you use an incorrect aligner, it can spoil the screw head and you may never be able to open the screw easily after that. So we picked up a 4-way aligner now, the Phillips aligner. We are going to place it there and try and slightly press it and turn it around, and you will be able to see how we are able to open the screw very easily. So it's a very simple process, but you need to handle it gently, not press it too hard or force the aligner on top of the screw, and you would be able to see how easily you are able to remove the screw from the mobile phone. Now we will try and look at another mobile phone and see how we can open a screw on this mobile phone. Now here you probably see a 6-way aligner. Now you need to ensure that you use a 6-way aligner to open this screw. You cannot use a flat screw, a flat aligner, or a Phillips screw aligner. If you use them, they can spoil the screw head and you will never be able to remove the screw properly. Apart from these, if you use an incorrect aligner, it can even spoil the body of the mobile phone, and it can really have a bad impact on the mobile phone also. Now, you must also remember, as we earlier said, that you need to identify the right thickness of the 6-way aligner that fits in. Alright. So, you could try and place some of these aligners and check whether it is able to hold on tightly. If it's able to hold on tightly, then use that aligner to open the screw. If something is not fitting in, don't force fit it, because as I said earlier, it could spoil the screw head and it can even damage the mobile phone. Now, once you have the right fitment or the right aligner of the right thickness, it will fit in very well, and gently you will be able to open the screw from its position, just as you are seeing it on your screen. So, even in the hex or the 6-way screw aligners, the thicknesses differ, and you need to ensure that you use the right thickness while opening these screws. So, for example, if you have a mobile phone that's come for repair, it is always recommended that you don't keep it in your hand when you are unscrewing or working on it, because your hands could be unstable and that could result in the mobile slipping from your hand. So, it's better that you place it on the table. A little while ago, we kept it in the hand and opened the screw just to ensure that we are able to capture it on the camera. But when you're working on actual mobile phones, please ensure that the mobile phone is placed firmly on the table or the work area, and place the aligner right on top of the screws in a straight way. It should not be tilted, because if it's tilted, your screws might not go in properly, or they might get stuck in very different directions. So, ensure that you hold the aligner straight to the screw and gently turn it for opening or tightening the screws. Now, as you can see, very lightly, if you place it and turn it around, the screws will automatically come out. Now, remember, when you keep it in hand and do it, it's also possible that you might hurt yourself if the aligner slips, and therefore it's a safety hazard. So, whenever you need to work on mobile phones, always ensure that you place them on a firm area like a table or a work area, and only then try using the aligners to open these screws. Now, one of the other things that you must remember is, after you remove the screws, you need to be careful on where you place it. If you place it randomly here or there, you will have a lot of stuff on your working table. You might even lose the screw, and it might be very difficult, and that's where we use something like this. So, you keep a magnet. We have used a speaker which has a heavy magnet at the back. So, use that to ensure that you are keeping the screws safely in a particular place. This will ensure that you don't lose the screws, and you are able to get back the exact screw and put it back on your mobile phone after your task is completed. Now, let's try and understand how we use the tweezers. But before we get to the tweezers, we need to also understand another important element, which is the thinner. We have seen the thinner in the previous video also, but it's important. Let's try and revisit how thinners need to be used. Now, here we have a PCB which has a lot of dust or dirt in it. Now, many a times PCBs will also have a lot of moisture in it, which could result in malfunctioning of the circuit, and that is where we use the thinner. So, thinner usually comes in large boxes, but we usually pour it out into smaller containers. So, it's very easy to use, and the flow is controlled, and you don't need to pour a lot of thinner on PCBs, because that could also spoil the PCB. And it's also important that the thinners are usually, they are made of spirit or substances that can evaporate. So, you need to ensure that you place it in a sealed container at all points of time, so that you don't waste any of this liquid. So, whenever you need to clean a PCB, just ensure that you use the smaller box. The bigger box can be kept in a safer place. This is also a safety requirement, because when you are going to be working with wires or hot items, it can create sparks, and that is why you need to ensure that you keep them safely, and just keep a small bottle of thinner with you that can be used to clean up the PCBs whenever you need. As you can see, you pour the thinner on top of the PCB and then take the brush that we showed you before and slightly brush it very lightly. Now, you don't need to press it very hard, and you need to ensure that you use a soft bristled brush so that it doesn't affect the PCB also negatively. And as you can see, when you brush it like this, the board is very clean, the dust and dirt is completely removed, even any moisture that is left out on the board is completely cleared off thanks to the thinner. Now, using this thinner, you will be able to clean up the board and you can see the specific components very clearly. So, wherever you think there is a little bit of dust and you need to clean it up, you can try clean it, and then you need to wipe it off with a brush. Now, one of the other things you must remember is while you are using a thinner, always ensure that you wait till the thinner dries out of the PCB completely before you actually try out anything on the PCB or before you test the PCB. Otherwise, what could happen is, because this is a liquid substance, it could even short the circuit, which means the circuit can be spoiled if the thinner is still there in the PCB and you are trying to work on the PCB. So, ensure that it is dried out completely. You can use a hot air gun for it, and you will probably see hot air gun in one of the other videos. So, you can use it to ensure that you dry out whatever thinner is left out on the PCB, and then only start working on the PCB. Now, moving on, let us try and understand how we need to use the tweezers. Now, as you can see on the PCB, there are very, very minute components which you cannot hold with your fingers, and that is where we need to use these tweezers. The tweezers have very sharp edges which will help you hold the resistance, conductor, connector, and each of these ICs or components. It is very easy to hold them using the tweezers, and that is where we use the tweezers more often. Now, while you are placing these ICs or while you are removing any of these components, you can use different types of tweezers depending on how convenient it is, depending on which position the component is in. You can try and use different tweezers. This is a pointed tweezer, this is a bent tweezer. So, different types of tweezers are available, and you need to decide which tweezer is the right one for you to be able to take these components out or to place these components back on a PCB. Now, these are just two types of tweezers. There are many different types of tweezers in different shapes. Depending on the requirement, you can try and use the respective tweezers. Now, whenever you need to hold these tweezers, always hold it this way, similar to how you will hold a pen or a pencil while you are writing. This will ensure that it will give you better stability and will ensure that you are able to take it out very easily. So, just like you would use your hands for writing, similarly hold the tweezers also in exactly the same way to ensure that you are able to work conveniently. Now, holding it in other ways can actually spoil the components and can also be harmful to yourself, and that is the reason why you need to ensure that you hold them properly while you are using them on PCBs. The same thing is applicable for aligners or any other tools that you may use. You need to ensure that you hold them in the right position and use them effectively on the PCBs. Another important tool that you will be using in mobile repairing is a cutter. Well, this is a large size cutter which is used in electrical work, but in mobile repairing we use something which looks similar but of a smaller size. So, using this we can actually do a lot of jumper setting. Wherever jumper setting needs to be done, you need to ensure that we use this tool to cut the right amount of jumper. Now, to cut this, as you can see rightly, you hold it on the wire and you just press it hard the way you see it on the screen, and it will be able to cut out exactly the length that you would require. Now, while you are cutting it out, you need to ensure that you press it hard and cut it out. You do not need to necessarily drag it or pull it out, that is not needed. A strong push and it will be able to, a strong cut and it will be able to open, or it will be able to cut out the required amount of wire. Apart from these, you will also see a magnifying glass in front of you. A magnifying glass is also an essential tool. In one of the earlier videos, you may have seen a magnifying lens that we use to magnify the components there. Now, this is a smaller version of it. So, whenever you are working on boards, the components are very small, you may not be able to see them with your naked eye, and that is where you may need to magnify them so that you are able to identify these components very clearly. And that is where we use the magnifying glass. So, you place it on top and you will be able to clearly see each of those components, and that will tell you where which component is placed, and it will help you ensure that you are able to do a clean job when you are repairing any kind of mobile phone. This can also be used to find out where soldering is not proper, where there is dust or humidity or any of that can be very clearly seen through this magnifying glass, and you will be able to pick up those problems and solve those problems in the area of mobile repairing. So, as you saw in this video, we learned how we need to use what aligners are, what are different types of aligners, how we need to use those aligners. We also saw a little more about how we need to use the tweezers when you are removing or placing components on a mobile PCB. We also understood how we need to use the thinner to clean up the dust and humidity on the PCBs. We also saw a little bit about how we can cut out wires, specifically when you need to do jumper settings. So, those are some essential aspects that you need to know as you keep going and learning in the mobile repairing course. Keep learning. Thank you very much.